Shalom, shalom. It's Brother Atazadak, Hero Israel. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 13 breakdown. Giving all honor and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash. I want to give the double honors to the elders apostles of Great Millstone, teaching rule well, teaching the lost sheep of the house of Israel, in truth and sincerity. Now let's get right into it. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 verse 1. And it reads, Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass, or a tinkling cymbal. So essentially what Paul's doing here, he's making a comparison. The tongues of men, meaning the different languages of men, and those of the angels, in the spiritual realm. And saying that without charity, those things are worthless. So he's essentially saying the point here that he's making is that charity is the more important than these various tongues and various signs. An example being, let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 1. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 1. Now as touching things offered unto idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffeth up, but charity edifieth. So this is the point that he's making in this chapter. The edification of the body in these various churches, starting with these that he wrote in the church of Corinth. Because again, tongues and these various signs are nothing without the charity aspect, which is the edification of the body. Now you have charity that is physical, and you have a spiritual charity when you're building up, which mainly this is what Paul is going into. These various practicing Jews and Israelite foreigners building up each other in these various congregations. Because again, you had Israelite foreigners that were returning back to their former covenants and customs. So there had to be a unity, a edifying of these two different mindsets. Now, let's go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 2. And though I have the gift of prophecy, and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains, and have no charity, I am nothing. Because again, the gift of prophecy, to understand the things spoken of by the prophets concerning things that had to come to pass, and all the knowledge of the parables and dark sentences that were expounded on by Yahushua Mashiach, and concerning prophecy, the things that the prophets prophesied of. So all these things are worthless if you have the ability, the gift to prophesy and to speak about the prophecies, to understand the mysteries, to have all the knowledge, and you have all faith. For example, today you have some that are getting built up and are built up in the proper way, and they have all the faith, but all that is worthless if you don't have that charity. Now that charity goes into what Yahushua Mashiach taught about your light not being hid under a bushel, your candle being not hid under a bushel. Because all these things are worthless if you are not being charitable with the knowledge, with the doctrine. This is what Paul's going into in this chapter. Being charity, the main aspect that he's telling these various practicing Jews and Israelite foreigners in these various congregations, that is the key thing of them uniting under Yahushua Mashiach in these various churches. Now let's go to Book of Mark, chapter 4 and verse 21. It's Book of Mark, chapter 4 and verse 21, and it reads, "And he said unto them, Is a candle brought to be put under a bushel, or under a bed, and not to be set on a candlestick?" So, again, this is what Paul is introducing to the Church of Corinth and also these various congregations. So you have to understand these epistles are written to two different mindsets. The practicing Jew who had knowledge of the Torah, the law, and the prophets, and you had it written to these Israelite foreigners that had no prior knowledge of the law and the prophets. So what he's saying is to those, the Jews, here in verse 2, that have all this knowledge, the doctrine, the prophecies, things that have to come to pass, things that already came to pass according to the past accounts. And you have those things, but if you have not the charity, meaning the building up of mainly the Israelite foreigners that were returning back to the fold in this time. So this is the thing that he's pushing. And he's saying without that charity, building up of these Israelite foreigners and building up of each other, all those things profit nothing. Now, let's go down to verse 22. Let's see if I can check my notes real quick, Salaki, because there's more to it. Book of Mark, chapter 4 and verse 22. "For there is nothing hid which shall not be manifested, neither was anything kept secret, but that it should come abroad." So this is for Yahushua Mashiach. Salaki, let me see if I can check my notes real quick. And this was part of the doctrine that he was teaching to the multitude and also to the 12. But there's things that he revealed to the 12, and there's things that he spoke in parables concerning the doctrine to the multitude, as it states in verse 1. But let's get to the point. So we read verse 22. So these things have to come abroad. Whether you're in this time, you're getting built up in the doctrine, the understanding. You're supposed to expound on it, make the videos to edify the body. And if you're out on the highways and byways, you're built up. And you're supposed to let these things be said abroad. Now, but here's the point in verse 23. "If any man have ears to hear, let him hear." And he said unto them, "Take heed." Verse 24. "And he said unto them, Take heed with what ye hear, with what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you. And unto you that hear shall more be given." So, like they say, to whom much is given, much is required. And this is part of the doctrine. And like he said in verse 21, you're supposed to not hide these things, this understanding. Which is why this is called this is the parable about the light that Yahushua is speaking on. says verse 25, for he that hath, to him shall be given, and he that hath not, from him shall be taken, even that which he hath. So this is the point, that you have to be built up and constantly growing in this thing. And you will see Paul speaks on the same things that Yahushua Mashiach taught. He's teaching his various churches to build each other up, and that you have to constantly be growing. And see if I can get another precept. Or actually, we can read on down, verse 26. And he said, so is the kingdom of Yahweh, as if a man should cast seed unto the ground, and should sleep, and rise night and day, and the seed should spring, and grow up. He knoweth not how. Verse 28. For the earth bringeth forth fruit of herself, first the blade, then the ear, after that the full corn in the ear. Verse 29. But when the fruit is brought forth, immediately he putteth in the sickle, because the harvest is come. So he is likening the kingdom of the Most High unto a man who casts seed into the ground, which grows and like a corn, for example, it sprouts, and then it's growing, and then you see the fruits of the seed. So this is what Yahushua Mashiach is teaching, that you gotta be constantly growing in this thing, and ultimately the kingdom of the Most High is the nation of Israel. That's the so-called Black, Hispanic, Native Americans. But at the point that Yahushua said is that you have to constantly be growing, and to whom much is given, much will be revealed. Essentially, what he's saying in verse 24. Now we can go to the book of Mark, chapter 4, and verse 19. Go back down to 19. These are verse or Mark 4 and 18. These are they which are sown among thorns, such as hear the word, and the cares of this world, and the deceitfulness of riches, and the lust of other things entering in, choke the word, and it becometh unfruitful. So these are those that get caught up in the cares of the world, the deceitfulness of riches, the lust of the eyes, of the and of the commutations thereof. And that's what causes you to choke on the word and stumble and fall to your destruction. So this is why Paul's teaching constantly charity is the important thing. This is the main subject in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Now let's go to the book of Matthew chapter 25 and verse 29. Just to make it brief as possible, to get the point across. Book of Matthew chapter 25 and verse 29. And it reads, for unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. Meaning, to one that has, and you're constantly growing, the Spirit is going to sup with you to get understanding, to be able to expound and edify the lambs of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. And it says, and he shall have abundance, but from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. Verse 30, and cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, there should be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So this is that unprofitable servant. This is what Yahushua Mashiach's teaching, and also Paul is the main focus in chapters 13 and 14 on how not to be that unprofitable servant. Now let's go back to Actually, let's go to book of Luke, chapter 13 and verse 18. Salakia. Book of Luke, chapter 13, verse 18. And it reads, Then said he, Unto what is the kingdom of the Most High like? And whereunto shall I resemble it? Verse 19. It is like a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and cast into his garden. And it grew and waxed a great tree, and the fowls of the air lodged into the branches of it. Now, you can see how Shai is likening this to the kingdom of the Most High. And the kingdom of the Most High starts with the nation of Yasharallah, the 12 tribes. Through the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That would be the so-called Black Hispanic Native Americans today. Now you have that small mustard seed, which a man takes, which is and cast it into the garden, and it grows and it grows, and eventually, now this is also a representation of the truth, which starting from one west was planted and considered a small thing. Now you have Esau and these other nations. They didn't take this as seriously as now. They thought it was just a something that would not take fruit. But the Most High makes the increase, and now you have that great tree, and these various camps coming out of it. You have various camps out there and videos and teaching the nation of Israel. So now, but this is also representation of one being in the truth, and this is what Paul is trying to. He's This is a thing that he's pushing on, that charity, and being that seed, which is constantly being built up and growing. And eventually turns into a tree. The tree has the branches, and the branches let the other fowls of the air to nest on the branches. So this is what he's pushing in these various churches, to build each other up, so you can increase. Now let's go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. 1 Corinthians 13 and verse 4. Salakia, verse 3. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. So you got to understand, he's saying, although you bestow all your goods to feed the poor, meaning physically, you give somebody a loaf of bread, like they say, or a fish. But they say, I think it's a proverb, that Esau has. Well, he essentially got that from the scriptures. But there's a proverb that says, you give a man a fish, and he will thank you. But if you teach a man how to fish, then he'll owe you, or he'll be in great gratitude, or something to that extent. So this is what Paul is saying here in verse 3. Because you can give somebody a fish, or you can teach somebody how to fish. Now this is what the scriptures do. They teach us how to fish. So when we're built up, we can go out and teach His truth. So you can teach somebody, you can bestow your goods to feed the poor, or you can do better, which is what Paul is saying. And though you sacrifice your body, but you have not that charity. Now that charity that he's saying in the end of the verse, he's saying essentially, or you teach them how to hunt. So though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, meaning although you give somebody a fish, and you give your life to giving people fishes. But if you have not charity, meaning you don't show them how to fish for fish instead of giving them the fish, then there really is no profit. So that is the thing that Paul's pushing to the church of Corinth and these various churches to build each other up in the correct manner. Now let's go to verse 4. And it reads, charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not, because you have to have patience in this truth and teaching this truth. Because you're going to get some backlash. You can get, society may look at you different for not being part of this, the wickedness that this society portrays. And but Yahweh Shai Mashiach said, they hated me before they hated you. But the point here is that you have to be able to suffer and be patient in this thing. Because you had Jews, practicing Jews, and Israelite foreigners gathering together during these times. So, of course, they had to be patient with these Israelite foreigners and teaching them and getting them back into their former covenants and customs. So it reads, charity suffered long and is kind. Charity envieth not. And charity vaunteth not itself and is not puffed up. So you have to understand, you're reading this through the mindset of a practicing Jew and the mindset of an Israelite foreigner that were in these various congregations. So he's teaching these Jews not to be proud, not to be puffed up. And these Israelite foreigners not to envy these practicing Jews because they have more of the understanding. But if they're building each other up, then they'll be constantly growing in this thing. Now let's go to verse 5. Doeth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked. Salakia, thinketh no evil. Verse 6, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth. Now, verse 7, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Verse 8, charity never faileth, but whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. Verse 9, for we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. So all these things will eventually be done away, which is what Paul is teaching. Now, verse 11, when I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. So this is also what is mentioned in Hebrews chapter 6 and verse 1. Now I'm not going to say he mentioned that, Paul, because they say that Hebrews was written by a student of Paul or someone who was taught by Paul. So if you go into the actual history, but you can see the doctrine lines up. This book of Hebrews chapter 6 and verse 1. And it reads, therefore, leaving the principles of the doctrine of Hamashiach, let us go on to perfection, not laying again the foundation of repentance from dead works, and the faith towards the Most High, of the doctrine of baptisms, and of laying on hands, and of the resurrection of the dead, and of eternal judgment. So the point of verse 1 is that Paul saying to leaving the principles and growing onto the meaning the milk and growing into the meat. So you're supposed to be growing constantly in this thing. And this is what he's saying to these Jews and these Gentiles. to be constantly growing, to be constantly building each other up. Now, here's an example that I want to bring out pertaining to verse 3, 1 Corinthians 13:3. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. Now you can see that is also spoken of in the book of James. Slack. It's book of James, chapter 2. Actually, slack. See if I can find that precept. It's book of James, chapter 2, and verse 15. If a brother or sister be naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you say unto them, Depart in peace, be you warm and filled, notwithstanding you give them not those things which are needful to the body, what does it profit? So the point here is that you can see somebody that may need help, and you may give them a fish, and this is and you tell them to depart and be filled now that you gave them it. But unless you give them those things that are needful to the body, meaning that skill to fish for the fish, what does it profit? So that is the point that that Paul is explaining on building up these those in these various churches. And that goes with Hebrews 13:3. Now let's go back to the 1 Corinthians, book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 13, and verse 11. When I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child, and when I became a man, I put away childish things. This is why Paul said, and let's go to that precept. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 20. Brethren, be not children in understanding. Howbeit, in malice be ye children, but in understanding be men. So you're supposed to be growing in this thing. And in wickedness you should be steady decreasing. In anything that may be an unfruitful work, anything that might choke you up from from growing in this thing. Like it says in Mark chapter 4 and 21 on down. Actually, Mark 4 and 19 and on down. Now, let's go to 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 9. Book of 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 9. And it reads, Wherein I suffer trouble as an evildoer, even unto bonds, but the word of God is not bound. Verse 10, Therefore I endure all things for the elect's sake, that they may also obtain the salvation which is in Hamashiach Yahushai with eternal glory. So you gotta endure all things for the elect's sake. Whether you're getting built up, whether you're new to this thing, and whether you're abounding. So this is what Paul is writing to Timothy here. So as he was passing the torch per se to Timothy and teaching the churches, he's telling them to endure all things for the elect, which in that time were these various Jews and Israelite foreigners gathering together, so that they may obtain what the ministers, starting with the apostles and the disciples that were taught by Hamashiach Yahushai about the doctrine of the Heavenly Father. Now, let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 19. Salakia. Actually, I'll go back to that another time. 2 Corinthians, Salakia, chapter 3 and verse 18. But we all, with open face, beholding as in a glass the glory of the Lord, are changed into the same image, for glory to glory, even by the Spirit of the Lord. So when you're growing and abounding in this thing, and you're getting built up through the Spirit, you'll be changed into the image, starting with the inner man, and putting away the old man and putting on the new man, even by the Spirit of the Most High. Now let's go back to 1 Corinthians 13 and verse 12. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know, even as also I am known. So eventually, those who obtain and who endure unto the end, those will see face to face and will understand the things that Paul knew through the Spirit. And that's to those who endure unto the end. Verse 13, and now by the faith, hope, charity, these three, but the greatest of these is charity. Why? Because as you read on in chapter 14 and verse 1, it says, follow after charity and desire spiritual gifts, but rather that you may prophesy. Because when you're prophesying, and these two chapters mainly go together. So I'm going to go to the second video, do the second video on the next chapter shortly after this. So when you're showing that charity and prophesying, you're showing your faith in this thing, and what is the hope, not just for yourself, but for the elect, that is of the nation of Israel. And that is that true charity. That is why Paul is saying in the end of this chapter that the greatest of those things is charity. Because you're supposed to receive this word. You're supposed to get built up. And you're supposed to abound in this thing. And ultimately for the elect, so that they may receive it. And those who were predestinated to receive it. Those who were supposed to receive it through the power of Spirit of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. Bashim Rakakodash. So let me get another precept. I'll go ahead and close out this book, Isaiah 52 and verse 8. Book of Isaiah, chapter 52, and verse 8. Salaki. And it says, Thy watchmen shall lift up the voice, with the voice together shall they sing. For they shall see eye to eye when the Lord shall bring again Zion. So that's also going into those that are teaching and making exhortation videos and expounding on the doctrine. They have to see eye to eye, and you have to speak the same thing. So, you have to speak the things that are in the scriptures first and foremost. And the doctrine is ultimately the Heavenly Father's. But if you're speaking the same thing, then you know that that's that spirit of that's the spirit of truth. And that spirit, the spirit of error, is what some of these camps are doing with these different doctrines, with these when they're not breaking down the scriptures according to the doctrine, which was taught through the law and the prophets and Yahushua Mashiach. Now, so it says the watchmen shall lift up the voice and they'll speak together. They'll sing, and we're singing this great song when we're expounding and teaching on the Heavenly Father's words. And seeing eye to eye, is a term on being on the same accord. Now let's go into the book of Luke, chapter 21, verse 36. So this chapter isn't really too deep. This is Paul mainly saying in this chapter what is the most important thing in growing in this truth, especially during the time of these the Romans and the Greeks. Now let's go to the book of Luke 21:36. Book of Luke chapter 21 verse 36, and it reads, watch ye therefore and pray always. So this is also a part of this thing. Gotta watch what's going on in the world, what's going on in the news, and you gotta pray always. Why? That you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man, which is Yahushua Mashiach. Which is why I brought out this precept, because right now we're seeing through that dark glass, and eventually those who obtain, who endure to the end, the elect within the elect, will ultimately see face to face Yahushua Mashiach. And we believe that through faith, which is one of the things that Paul is mentioning in the latter verses in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. So now let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And verse 13. And now by the faith, hope, charity, these three, but the greatest of these is charity. So you got to have that faith. You got to have that hope. You got to watch. You got to pray. But the most important thing is charity. Because with charity, you're abounding. You're not stagnant. You're constantly meditating. You're constantly building up the edifying of the body. So this is 1 Corinthians chapter 13 breakdown. Hear, O Israel, giving all honor and glory to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakal Kodash, Shalom, Bad Babal.